Brought to you by the Johners Podcasting Network, found exclusively at WrestlingWithJohners.com. Hello, welcome to the latest episode of Wrestling with Johners, episode 238, part of the Johners Podcasting Network, of course. Got an awesome guest with us, live on a Monday evening with none other than the current OTT World Champion, the current TNT Extreme Ultra X Champion, Mr. Mark Haskins. Mark, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you?
Doing very well. I've been looking forward to this one. It's been a much anticipated episode, a much anticipated guest. And I want to say to anybody watching live at home, if you want to get in touch, if you want to drop any questions in for Mark Haskins, do so using your chosen device, and we'll do our very best to answer every single question live on air. But Mark, first of all, we've got to congratulate you. Is it about 15, 16 years in the business now that you've been pro?
Yeah, it's about that. My wrestling career is ready to take its GCSEs. So it's been a while. I had my first match when I was 18, and I'll be 34 in a couple of months. So it's flown by, and I very much feel like an old man now.
Oh, don't say that. Don't say that. You're in the prime of your career, I'm sure. But currently, as I mentioned in the intro, you're the current TNT Extreme Ultra X Champion, the most recent accolade, the most recent belts that you've picked up along the way in your glorious career. You've got a bit of a history with TNT Extreme up in Liverpool. You were their former world champion, but being their current Ultra X Champion, it's a new belt for you. What does it mean to you to be their Ultra X Champion currently then, Mark?
I mean, it's exciting times, you know. I was super excited to see where the wrestling scene would be coming back post sort of pandemic, and to go back to a company like TNT that obviously I have a long history with, that know I have a loyalty with to some extent, it is great. You know, it's great being back there and seeing everybody and seeing that they're still going, because there's a lot of companies that folded in the last few years. So it's nice to see some old faces still kicking about.
Absolutely, absolutely. And now they've got ties with GCW over in the States. Any temptation there to maybe fly back over to the other side of the Atlantic, and get involved in some inter-promotional matches? And I know that GCW are coming over to TNT, aren't there? There's going to be some cross-promotional shows in the summer. Any interest there from yourself?
Man, who knows what the future holds? You know, it's over the past 2 years, I've got very much used to being at home. So now traveling, for hours at a time feels like a real ache. But it's it comes with the territory, doesn't it? So but like I said, who knows where the future will take me? And maybe I'll end up going to America at some point again, maybe not.
There we go. And OTT. A huge accomplishment, becoming their world champion in, I think it was their first show back, wasn't it? July last year. A great accomplishment. You've been their champion for 280 plus days now. Wow. And you've kind of fought off all their top contenders, all their top challengers. But once again, being part of that promotion, that they really do seem to be taking it to the next level as far as independent wrestling is concerned. And once again, similar question, being their world champion, that must mean an awful lot to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I've worked with OTT since 2017, so it's a good handful of years now, and I've seen them go from strength to strength. They've continued to grow, they've continued to evolve, and being their representative, being their main guy now is a great honor for me. I love the Irish fans as well. They're just they're a bunch of crazy bastards. So
yes.
it's great again to go out there and perform for them again. And it was mad, for what was it, like a year and a half, 2 years that we were in a pandemic, going from absolutely nothing, and then first match back, win 2 championships. And it's it was a bit of a switching gears, shall we say. And since then, I've managed to wrestle a lot of guys that I haven't had the opportunity to wrestle before. I got to wrestle Rocky Romero, who's arguably one of the best wrestlers of this generation. Guys like LJ Cleary, who I think that within the next few years is really going to stamp their name out there on the independent wrestling scene. And who knows, hopefully even a bigger scene is still yet to come for him. I think that there's a lot of talent there that don't necessarily have the sort of the drawing power that that they once had, but I think that it's in a state of rebuild. And I think that in a very short space of time, you're going to realize just the caliber of talent that they have performing for them, and that you're really going to realize that and see a lot of new stars be born.
Absolutely. And Helen Flood's been in touch, watching via YouTube. So thank you, Helen, saying we love you too. So that's pretty awesome. And I got to say, OTT, they do the best hype videos in the business, don't they?
You know what? Sean Ryan is phenomenal.
Amazing, amazing.
One of my goals is I want to be rich enough that I can just pay him to film every day of my life. And
make how cool would that be?
I don't know what kind of witchcraft he uses, but he manages to take somebody like me and make me seem fantastic. So, he's a very talented man, and he was working for WWE for a while, and they let him go, and I think that WWE's loss is seriously whoever picks him up, and at the moment it's OTT. Is a huge gain for them. Just an absolute phenomenal talent.
Absolutely. We mentioned, or you mentioned briefly earlier about, lockdown, being out of action for 16, 17, year and a half, let's say. But what was your mindset like when you did come back? I know you had some sporadic no fans shows for Rev Pro and maybe one for ROH over in the States. But when you came back, say for OTT, you won 2 championships, their first show back. What was your kind of your mindset, and where was your kind of general kind of head at before you went through them curtains on the day?
During the pandemic, I went down a lot of rabbit holes, and I feel that I reached a very different state of consciousness through just, manipulating my surroundings, finding challenges that I otherwise wouldn't have ever really approached because I didn't have the time or the opportunity to do so. I discovered one of my now idols, a guy called David Goggins, who, if anybody knows of him, knows that this guy's just, arguably one of the baddest motherfuckers that's ever lived. He held a world record of the most amount of pull-ups in a 24-hour period. He's a former US Navy SEAL. And I took on one of his challenges, which was running 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours straight. And, I did a lot of things like this. There was times where if it was raining, if there was a storm, I live in Malvern, I literally live on the edge of a hill. So I was like, what, screw it. I'm going to put a weight vest on and I'm going to run through the rain. So I'd run 8 kilometers through the rain. Every 5 minutes I would stop and I'd do 50 reps of an exercise and 10 burpees. And, you're out there for hours on end. But then, there was part of that process that really changed my mindset in regards to everything, because you had so many reasons why you could give an excuse. You had so many reasons why you can just quit, and there's nobody around, there's no other mad fuckers up there walking through the rain, let alone running through it with a weight vest on, right? And, in all of these moments away from any kind of spotlight, away from anybody watching you, you find out who you are. Do you know what I mean? You find out this different level of yourself. You could just go and sit on a bench and eat ice cream and tell everybody that you did it. But instead, when you continue and when there's points that you can't physically run, and you just keep plodding forward, and you just keep doing your best in every moment that you can, you feel like you reach this whole new realm, and the past few years, this is just one of so many different rabbit holes, like I said, that I've been down, and so many different challenges that I've taken on. And, coming back from the pandemic, I was like, look, Ring of Honor had taken care of me, right? Ring of Honor had looked after me. And coming back from the pandemic, I felt like there was a responsibility there that, on the independent circuit that, I've for years, integrity's always been important to me. I've always tried to do the best I can in every situation. And I've always held myself to a high level of integrity, of being the best person that I could be, right? And this generation now that are coming through, they need people that are responsible. They need people who are going to step up, who are going to take the bull by the horns, who are going to help the next guys, the next set of talent, develop and so forth. So, coming back from it, I was like, okay, I feel like I'm not the same person that I was. I've developed. I'm 2 years down the line now. I knew a lot of people would take their foot off the pedal and that they would, get lazy. I knew that a lot of people, would use the time to not do a lot. And I'm like, no, screw that. I'm going to do 2 years of self-development. Do you know what I mean? I felt like I changed so much in such a short space of time. It literally felt like I lived 1,000 lives in 18 months, right? And coming back to wrestling, I was like, this is going to be completely different, right? The world shut down. Who knows who survived? Who knows what it's going to be like coming back to wrestling in 2021, and we got to Belfast on the day. I walk through the door and I get told that I'm on first. And they're like, you're literally on in half an hour, right?
Wow.
I'm like rushing around trying to get my gear on. I'm like, this shit's exactly the fucking same. Like nothing has changed at all. Do you know what I mean? Like you get to a venue, find out you're on first and you're like, fuck, I need to get ready and figure out who I'm wrestling. So, yeah, literally like came in, rushed around. I was like, yeah, nothing's changed. It's the same. Do you know what I mean? Like the only thing that's changed is me, I guess. So, but I had the match. It was with Adam Maxted, and I think he's a guy as well. So kind of strangely enough, I think one of the last matches I had for OTT was against Adam Maxted in Belfast. And then he was the first match that I had back in the same venue. So it was kind of like this weird, it felt like a weird set of bookends. Do you know what I mean? Where it was like, the end of one and then the start of another. And it was, I guess it was kind of cool, like I don't necessarily know if I believe in fate. I don't know if I necessarily believe in things happening for a reason, but there's incidents like that where I feel like I should.
And did you kind of reflect during the enforced layoff? Did you reflect on how you wanted to be perceived, what sort of character you wanted to come back with, how you wanted to be seen as the new updated Mark Haskins in 2021?
I wanted it to seem like the difference between night and day. And I wanted people like not even to have to ask, but just to know that something had gone on during that time, but they didn't know what, and coming back from everything, the one thing that kind of kept playing on my mind was, who is Mark Haskins as a 33-year-old man? I've been, I don't know, like my wrestling career has flown by in the blink of an eye. Like I started wrestling when I was 18. I've been through different phases. I've been through different stages. And who is this now more mature version of myself? I think that, they always say in wrestling, always be an extension of who you are. But what happens when who you are changes? That extension of yourself will also therefore change, coming back from things that I've made certain little challenges for myself. Like, I'm such a culprit of having worn black, like such a lot. And I was like, man, like everybody wears black. Like, I want to go and have as many matches as I can and make sure, like, make it almost like a challenge of like, how many different colors can I wear? There's the picture now, I've been watching a lot of Kenta Kobashi and Stone Cold Steve Austin, and that's why I ended up getting a robe, as I was like, I want to be like British Kobashi.
The robe is super cool, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Like I said, like I came up with a million ideas for different robes and different entrance gear and different colors of gear. And, I've never worn blue before in a wrestling capacity. So I was like, that's, the one of the first things I was like, that's going to make it a shift. Like I went back to wearing wrestling boots for a while and then remembered why I didn't wear them anymore. So the soles on them make me feel like I'm on stilts, and and I've gone from that to now being barefoot. That's the other thing is like I've literally spent the last 2 years of my life like every day just being barefoot. I heard of something called grounding, and if you haven't heard of it, then look it up. Like I train barefoot. Like I'll go for walks barefoot. I'll go running barefoot. And I came back to wrestling and I was like, screw it, I'm going to try wrestling barefoot. And then suddenly realized I was like, you know what? I can carry so much less gear around with me when all I have to do is carry kick pads, trunks, and an elbow pad, and a dope ass robe. So I've got kind of lazy in some regards because I'm like, I don't want to carry so much gear around with me anymore. Like I said, like I'm on that sort of that journey of like self-discovery, I guess, and trying to figure out who, current day me is.
Yeah. I want to take a deep dive into your wrestling career, how it all started a bit later on, but I want to talk to you about your online training and being an online coach. Tell us a bit about that, how it all got started, what the motivation is behind it and what you want to achieve with it.
I love helping people. I love feeling like I'm of some use to someone. So, I decided, what, screw it. If I, when I talk to people at wrestling shows, they seem to listen. If I tell somebody like, what you did in your match was really cool. They'll stop and they'll ask for advice. So I just figured, you know what, if people want to hear my opinion, if people want to speak to me, if people want to, know what I know, then, reach out. And I feel like I'm such a culprit of being a real hermit, like away from wrestling. Like I just disappear to my dark, quiet corner of the world, and I like being left like alone, but coming back, I felt like, what, I've been a hermit too much. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I need to make myself more accessible for those that want to reach me. So decided to set up my online training school. Putting up videos, things talking about just all the intricacies of pro wrestling, how to do this, how to do that, what's a match structure like, what's the sort of psychology, how to be a heel, how to be a face. I've got plans of how I want to develop it and seeing where it wants to go. And, in all reality, I had like zero expectations of anything really. I just decided one day I was going to film a video and put it together. And once I did one, I was like, oh man, like I really enjoyed the process, like I enjoyed, writing out what it was I wanted to do. I enjoyed filming it. And then, video editing, which is something that I learned probably about 10 years ago or more now. I haven't done a lot of in recent memory. So I was like, it was like going sort of back to your roots in some regards. And, trying something again that, like reigniting that spark with a previous passion, and enjoyed what I did. And, from there, I've just continued to develop it and just continue to, encourage it to grow. And, I hope that, like I said, I hope I'm of some sort of help to somebody along the way.
Absolutely. And I think you're referring to certainly the video that I saw in your Instagram feed, the video for aspiring wrestlers, where you gave good business advice on taking up a physical sport, for example, exercise, understanding branding, understanding accounting, finding the right training school, staying humble. Tell us about that video in particular, because why did you think it was important to emphasize some of those points in particular to aspiring wrestlers then, Mark?
So I think that a lot of the time when it comes to a problem, right, people, or when it comes to something like a dream or a passion, people tend to overthink, and people, don't tend to think of like, okay, how do I break this down part by part? I feel like wrestling and being a wrestler or any kind of career, that it's a machine. There's so many different clogs to it that turn, and definitely looking back on my wrestling career, I've been through these different, phases. I've been through different stages and such, like for the first year that I started training at 15. Now, I was still at school. We lived about 2 hours away from the training center. My dad is a preacher for the United Church, so he would always be in church every Sunday. And because he and I didn't have the greatest relationship growing up, my mom said to him, hey, I think that you should, Mark wants to be a pro wrestler. I think that you should, make this as sort of more, guys' time, and you guys can, get the chance to bond. And my dad would take me in the car down to Portsmouth. So we, that was really sort of, I guess, like a step for us to kind of bond and, start to sort of redevelop our relationship. And for the first year, I could only make it down there, say, once a month. And for the rest of the time, I was like, okay, well, I don't want to waste this time. Like, I still want to add towards it. So what can I do? And, I knew, from such an early age that this is what I wanted to do with my life. So I was very conscious of, okay, dissecting it and looking at it. I'm like, okay, so, doing things like, a promo or an interview, that's important. Okay. There's very much a showmanship side of wrestling. So, understanding, okay, well, in that case, I have to do something that kind of encourages it and, allows me to play around with different things. So I joined my drama group at school. I ended up in different plays and productions that the school were doing. I took drama for GCSE. It was the only GCSE that I got an A in. Everything else was, I think, C's or even worse. So, you could really tell by my grades what it was I excelled at. Then when I had to get into, I think literally about a week before college started, my careers officer just called me one day out of the blue and said, hey, I got somebody into a performing arts course, what are you doing with your life? And I was like, well, currently nothing, and she was like, well, do you want to give it a shot? And I was like, yeah, screw it, why not? I've got nothing else on. And then, through that, met so many other, different people, and, learned a lot as well. I think that, when you do something like theater, there's so many elements that transcend over into wrestling, you know, like particularly if you make it to the big leagues, you know, they tell you where that they want you to be positioned, you know, they want you positioned a certain way so you're always facing the camera, you know. There's so much of that carries over from theater. Like one thing that I learned during the performing arts course was my teacher taught me, she said, look, the people that you need to be, the mistake that people make is that they're always buddy with the other actors. The people that you need to be friends with are the production crew, because they can make or break you, right? I was one of very few people that, you know, I go out of my way to try and, to build relationships with everybody in regards to shows. Like we were saying, like one of the first people we put over in this interview was Sean Ryan, who, you know, deals with all, you know, the videos, the promotion for shows, you know, and there's so many talented people involved with wrestling, or at least there was in the pre-pandemic era, guys like, you know, Jack, Al, and Debbie who worked at Progress, who without them, you know, there literally would be no product. You know, you can have the best product in the world, but if there's no way to showcase it to anybody, do you know what I mean? Like, what do you really have? So, you know, there's, like I said, like there was so much of it that transcended over, and I think that there's so many people that are getting into wrestling that don't even know where to start. And it's like, okay, well, look, you know, the first thing that you need to do, if you can't wrestle every weekend, or if you can't get to a training school all the time, then work on all the other aspects. You know, like build your body up. You know, not everybody has to look like Superman, but what we do is physical. You know, there's been so many times that somebody's come into a training center and said, I want to be the next Rey Mysterio, and then we're like, okay, and then a set of push-ups later, and the dream is over. Do you know what I mean? They're like, oh, I didn't realize it would be this physical. It's like, have you ever watched wrestling before? You know, you're picking people up and throwing them around. Like, you know, I think that people hear this term of like wrestling's fake and they think that it's easy, and it's like, it's not. It's one of the most physical things that you can do. You know, just because, you know, a steel chair is being swung at your head doesn't mean to say that it hurts any less. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you have to know so many different aspects of things, you know, and that's why I think that things like, you know, like I took on rugby. That was another thing that I took on because, you know, I used to go to British wrestling shows, the old FWA, when I was growing up. And one of the wrestlers I contacted through that said to me, he was like, look, you know, you have to get used to physicality. Go and join a rugby club, or you know, go and do something like martial arts. You know, you get used to being thrown around. You get used to protecting yourself. You know, there's certain things in regards to moves or movement patterns that are very relevant. You know, I went to a 3 Points martial arts in Worcester a few months ago, and I was doing some Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and straight away they were like, oh, have you ever been before? I was like, well, I've done a bit of BJJ, and, you know, I didn't really mention wrestling at all. And then, you know, straight away they were like, okay, so what have you done? Because you're not just, you know, a newbie to this. You know, like there was so many, like, you know, aspects of things where I was like, okay, well, this kind of, you know, this, you know, some things transcend, some things don't, you know. And
of course.
yeah, just like I said, like if I can help anybody, if, you know, I'm just trying to give whatever it is that I've learned, you know, like I said, like I've been doing this, 16 years now. You know, I don't want to wrestle forever, you know, within, you know, a very short space of time. You know, 16 years has flown by, you know. I don't know if I'll be doing this much past 40. That's only 6 years away or so. So, you know, and I mean, I guess that's all well and good me saying it now, but, you know, when you get to 39 and you're still loving it, you know, who knows where it goes. So
absolutely,
if I can give back to the business, if I can help people along the way, if I can, you know, help somebody get a step further than where they would have got, you know, without my help, then, you know, I'm there to help anybody and everybody who reaches out and who listens.
Absolutely. And we'll do all the plugs a bit later on, but just for the purposes of your online training, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they are interested in picking your brains or getting involved with your online training courses? Go to my website,
Haskins Online Wrestling, which I thought was really clever because it's "This is how." But yeah, I know I'm probably the only person who appreciates that. But yeah, go to HaskinsOnlineWrestling.com and you can reach me through there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I do need to throw a quick plug to our sponsors, 1310 Apparel Mark, who are the excellent sponsors of not only this podcast, Wrestling with Johners, but the Johners Podcasting Network. And if you head over to their store at WrestleMerch Central, you can see their entire range of apparel, including their hardcore range of t-shirts and hoodies, and their lucha range of beanies, hats, t-shirts, and hoodies, and the more traditional 1310 apparel and Four Corners shirts. And if you head over to their WrestleMerch Central store, You can see the exclusive 1310 Heidi Katrina design there. And as a viewer or a listener to the Wrestling with Jonas podcast, you can take advantage of our great offer with them. And at checkout, you can save yourself 10% simply by using the discount code 1310WMC. So visit 1310 store at WrestleMart Central, and don't forget to use the discount code 1310WMC to save yourself 10% off at checkout. Mark,
that's some cool looking stuff, man. I might go to that website now while I'm
100%. You got the Mark Haskins seal of approval, and I'm wearing one of their shirts, so it can't be too bad. But take us all the way back to when pro wrestling first came into your life. You mentioned earlier that you started training nice and young, 15 years of age. But when did wrestling first come into your kind of eye holes and change the world forever?
So you know what, I've really thought about this, and I think that I don't know, I have this really weird theory, right? That anything that you have in your adult life somewhere stems from a childhood, trauma or a memory or a feeling, right? And I remember there were these two kids that joined my school. They were twins, and we were playing football one day after school, and one of them got tackled, and he was on the floor and he was moaning, and I was a real cocky little shit when I was a kid. So I was I was mocking him, and because I just didn't like crybabies that were pretending to be hurt when they clearly weren't. And, I don't even remember him getting up. It was like he was on the floor and then suddenly he was in my face, and he grabbed my hands and he smashed them into my own face, and I just started bleeding everywhere. Right. And of course I went running, crying to my mum, and, she came down, and it was kind of funny because she was, being a protective mum, and she was, trying to tell one of them off, but because they were identical twins, she was like, right, which one of you hit my son? And she's like, right, I'm angry at you. And then, months later, so I had a friend, one of my childhood best friends was a guy named Andy Cook, right? Who he developed cerebral palsy, I think around the age of sort of 10. And we'd always sort of been going through the same phases at the same time. And I think one day he just kind of came around to my house, and I'd somehow acquired a wrestling figure from a car boot sale or something. And he was like, oh, I didn't realize you like wrestling. And I was like, well, I've just seen these toys at my friends' houses and I wanted to start collecting them. So he was like, okay, next time I come around, I'll bring around a videotape. And he brought around a tape of, it was Bad Blood 97. And it was the first Hell in a Cell match with Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker.
You couldn't get any better than that. Yeah,
seeing Shawn Michaels, covered in blood, and being the cocky kid with long blonde hair, and then but the fact that he was able to overcome the bigger boy as such a big scary guy, I think that there was something there where I was like, wow, this is a world where where I can succeed. You know what I mean? And from there, it just went from strength to strength. Like I said, my friend Andy, we really developed our friendship over pro wrestling, and we would call each other every week and tell each other if we've been to the toy shop and found new wrestling figures. We were like, oh, you need to go, they've got a new series out and what have you. And I didn't have Sky, so we'd always film Raw on a Friday and then bring it around to my house on a weekend, and we'd play with wrestling figures for hours, put the VHS on, and that's how old I am. Down in the corner, you feel my pain, right? So we would, our friendship just continued from there. And as his condition deteriorated, I always felt like it was always our dream to make it in wrestling together, right? And we were like, by the time that we're older, maybe there's an operation, maybe there's a treatment that will allow him to, walk again, or maybe there's something that will allow him, because his speech started to slur, that he would be able to be a commentator or a manager or something. And when we realized that really wasn't the case, I think that I kind of took it on a lot more myself, where I was like, okay, well, I have to succeed because I'm doing this for both of us. He never asked for anything in that regard, but I was always like, I have to make it somewhere, because I have to be able to say, hey, look, you gave me this dream, we grew up with this together, and I'm doing this for the both of us, and I think one of the last times I saw him was after one of my tours in Japan. And that's going back 10 years or so now. And I got a picture of us together, and he was really happy I'd made it. And then Yeah, and then I think a few years later, I saw him again. You know, our lives went different ways, but he was a huge inspiration to me because he was you know, like I said, like he couldn't even reach his hand out in a straight line. Like it was very, you know, delayed. And he, no matter how bad his condition got, I never once heard him moan. I never once heard him complain. Like he just cracked on, and you know, he went from strength to strength. Like he would go skiing on skiing holidays and stuff. And I was like, okay, well, if you know, if he's capable of doing that, I'm capable of doing a set of push-ups. Do you know what I mean? Like I, you know, I got to go that extra mile to try and keep up with him because he was a, you know, a huge role model for me. And you know, then I think, where was it? I was at Chris Travis's funeral when my mum called me to say that my childhood best friend Andy had died. So I was like, oh shit, you know, like you know, I don't feel like I ever reached the point that I wanted to be able to say to him, hey, look, like, you know, we went the full distance. Do you know what I'm saying? But he's always, he's always on my mind. You know, he's, you know, I always, you know, carry on. I always think of him, you know, every once, you know, anytime I'm going through a situation, I always think, hey, look, you know, I've still got an opportunity to be here. I've still got an opportunity to do this. And he doesn't, you know. So that was pretty much how I got started, as being a fan. And then, yeah, like I said, when I turned about 15, my parents were, I guess, were expecting me to grow out of wrestling. And then I was like, nope, going the opposite way. We're
no chance. So, let me talk to you about the FWA Academy, because I think you kind of alluded to that earlier. But that was where you really started developing and kind of learning as a performer. And I think it was with Mark Sloan was the chief guy down there, wasn't it? And I think you broke in at about the same time as Wade, Lion Kid. Joel Redman, I think, was there around the same time as well. Thinking back to them early days at the FWA Academy, what do you remember? Any fond memories that jump out at you?
So when I first started training, I had a few training sessions with PJ Black because he was a trainee down there. And I remember the first time I ever saw him, there was this notorious blue door, right? You go through the blue doors and there's the training center. And we were all waiting for our trainer to turn up. And PJ had found a paint tin in the corner of the car park. And he took a little bit and he just, with a brush, just put it underneath the handle of the door so you couldn't see it, because he knew that, like, the second that they turned up to open it, that whoever opened it would just get a handful of paint. And yeah, I remember, like, any training session we were in, like there used to be this big rafter that went across the room, and PJ would do these crazy moves where he'd like springboard off the rope, swing on the rafter, and, you know, hit somebody with a Hurricane Rana, and, you know, just all this, you know, mad stuff. So it was great during my run with Ring of Honor, getting to catch up with him, and, you know, see him after our lives had gone separate routes, and, you know, he ended up having the success that he had. Apart from that, it felt very much like a dojo, you know, like we were put through some just really horrendous workouts, and just, just stuff that just would knacker you out, and it would be so physically, emotionally, and mentally draining. And you'd have to find that strength to just to keep going, you know, like, you know, there would be times where we'd have to run for, say, like quarter of a mile with somebody on our back. We would have to do these mad workouts where it would be like 6 sets of 25 push-ups, squats, burpees, mountain climbers, sit-ups, crunches, or it would be 4 sets of 50 burpees, push-ups, squats, and sit-ups. And I still suffer from the PTSD of all of that now.
It sounds like a Japanese dojo. I don't know about anything you find in the UK.
Yeah, anything that had come out of a Rocky movie is something that you ended up doing. Do you know what I mean? If you had to run up a mountain, or, you know, overhead press your family in a tractor cart or something, it was very much worked in somehow. Joel Redman, and he and I both moved to Portsmouth at the same time, so we ended up moving in together. And for a good while, he was like the big brother that I never had. And it's kind of weird how our careers, you know, kind of sort of followed each other in a lot of ways. You know, when he got to NXT, I was with TNA. You know, we spent time together out in Florida, and it's weird just how sometimes you have people like that kind of come into your life, that you have those kind of connections and relationships with, where, you know, your careers kind of parallel each other, even though you don't necessarily, you know each other or anything, you know, and then your paths just seem to sort of intertwine and cross.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think yourself and Joel, like I say, went through your first couple of years together. It kind of almost intertwined with one another's career, and you tagged a lot. But I want to take you to Germany, because fast forward to 2009, and you started touring outside of the UK pretty much for the first time, and it was with WXW, wasn't it? And you had a few tours with them, some matches, some tag matches with Joel, some matches involving, I think Walter might have been involved with one of them, whoever got down here. But this photo here you posted on your Instagram, a triple threat match with El Generico, yourself, and Malachi Black, Alistair Black. So some really fond memories of that first year, 2009, in Germany, where you kind of visited quite often, didn't you?
Yeah, it was funny. The first show I had in Germany, where I think was at the tail end of 2007. And I think I got blackballed for a year.
Really?
Yeah, I don't remember. I think I spat water on a fan or something. And yeah, they were like, "Yeah, you're not coming back." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, fair enough." And a year later, you know what? They decided to give me a second chance. I learned my lesson. I was like, "Yeah, I definitely won't do that ever again."
Yeah,
and,
I'll be good honest.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, from there, from the time coming back the second time around, yeah, we were off to a much better start. So got to have a lot of just when I look back at that time, there was so many insane matches which I wish I could have again now. Like I remember there was one where it was Malachi Black and myself versus the Young Bucks, right? And I was like, man, like imagine that match now in 2022. You know, like that was back at a time where I don't feel like any of us really knew what we were doing. And it's, you know, I had matches with guys like Adam Cole. Like you said, I had a match with Walter out there before he was the Walter that we now know.
I think John Moxley, Sami Callihan,
Emil
Satochi,
Yeah, like, and it's mad, especially like looking back at it, because at that time, like all of us were just guys trying to break out and make a name for ourselves. And you know, I feel like in recent years, a lot of the guys who have come through have definitely, I feel, kind of been spoiled to some extent, because they're just back in that time, there wasn't that level of talent that was around, you know, like, you know, pre-pandemic, there was, you know, you could literally work every night of the week, you know, you could, and they were good shows, you know, back when there was things like What Culture or Defiant, you know, there's, you know, within a space of a few months, you could go from being a trainee wrestler to wrestling in front of thousands of fans on a nightly basis. It was, you know, the scene was absolutely booming, and, you know, you weren't having to put up with, you know, shitty 6 a.m. Ryanair flights, you know, to go out to Germany and, you know, sit around a venue for like 10 hours and still be rushing around before your match because you're still not ready yet somehow. So, you know, and yeah, it was a great period of my life. Yeah, I still have fond memories of it now.
Absolutely. And I think you mentioned the match teaming with Malachi Black against the Young Bucks. I think, was that a cross-promotional match with Dragon Gate? And is that how you first fell into their radar, I suppose?
Pretty much, yeah. So I had been working behind the scenes for the Dragon Gate show that happened. So there were 3 shows in 2009 that Dragon Gate came over for. There was one in Spain on the Friday, one on the Saturday for WXW in Germany, and then one in my hometown of Oxford, your hometown too, at the Regal, what was it? The Regal Theatre, I think it was, or it was like a theatre turned into a bar or something like that.
I remember it as a theatre, sure, yeah.
Right, yeah, and so I've been heavily involved in the build up to that. You know, something that I've never really talked about much is like when Pro Wrestling Noah came over in 2008. I helped promote the show. I co-promoted the show on the second day with Dragon Gate when they came over. I helped, you know, do a lot of things in the build up to that, like you know, from printing the curtains to, you know, writing press releases to, you know, postering for the shows, you know, from, a lot of different things, like, you know, helping make the buckle pads, stuff like that. Like, you know, I was very hands-on. Yeah, like even editing the show and helping produce the DVD, you know, that was a lot of things that I sort of took on behind the scenes that, that I realized, you know, even then, that wrestling isn't just wrestling. Do you know what I mean? Like there's so many different parts to it, you know, and if you can learn every aspect of the game, then there's different areas for you to move into.
Of course.
You know, so so just having an appreciation for all the work that goes into it elsewhere. And the Dragon Gate shows happened in 2009. I did the show on the the Saturday, which is funny because I actually lost my job in order to have that show, right? So in about a month before, I was working in like a clothes store in Portsmouth, and it was just a dead end job to try and help, cover the rent so I could continue to train at the time. And there was a weekend where there was I think there was like a show in Germany, and then there was I think it was the FWA show when they came back in 2009 the next day, and I was like, I don't want to miss the show in Germany because I don't want that to possibly have further effects with them pulling me from the Dragon Gate show. Like, I don't know why, but like you always have that kind of like that slight paranoia as a wrestler that you're like, oh no, if I miss one show they'll fire me. But anyway, so it got to the day before and they were like, no, you're going to work one of the shifts that weekend. I was like, I can't. Like, I'm doing this for, to be here for wrestling. Like, if I'm not getting wrestling.
Not the other way around. Yeah.
Yeah, why am I here? And I literally went into work the day before. I was like, yeah, look, I just want to let you know, I'm going to be an asshole here, but I'm not going to let you down. This is the sense that I'm not going to be here this weekend. Like, I'm going to go do these shows. And I'll accept whatever consequences come of that. And they were like, well, if you hand in your resignation, then, go ahead. We were expecting you to just pull a sickie. And I was like, no, I'm going to let you know, like, at least that, that I'm not going to be here. So you have a chance to kind of, to cover your own asses, basically.
Of course.
And they were like, yeah, you can finish up your shifts until the end of the month and then you're gone. So, I was like, because I knew that Dragon Gate was coming up, I was like, right, I have to get, I have to get to Japan. Like, I have to make this opportunity work. So I put this like abundance of pressure on myself, and I'd always wanted to go to Japan. Like I'd always mapped out my wrestling career where I was like, okay, I want to break out in the UK, then I want to break out to Europe, and then I want to get to Japan, then I want to get to America, and so forth. And sure enough, at the end of the Dragon Gate show in Oxford, they offered me a tour, and I was like, oh, thank fuck, because I had like nothing else planned at all.
You'd been going back on your hands and knees saying, please, can I have the job back?
Maybe, yeah. But it was very much this kind of like the sense of like make or break. Do you know what
exactly.
I mean? Yeah. There's a saying of, the motivational speakers talk about where it's like, if you want to succeed, think of it as like when, warriors would storm an island. If you burn the boats, then you're in a do or die situation. And when you're in that do or die situation, when you have no plan B, that's usually when you succeed, because you have to. There's literally no other option. It's like that has to be the way forward. And fortunately enough, there's been a good handful of times in my life where that has been the case and it's paid off.
Yeah, and you mentioned about eventually getting the tour with Dragon Gate. I think we're talking 2010 now. So you went over there on 3 separate tours, didn't you? I think 3 2-month tours through till about September of that year. But I mean, looking it up, I think you wrestled about 70 matches, 70 plus matches while you're out there. I mean, I could be wrong in that, but tell us about kind of going over there, spending the vast majority of 2010 over in Japan then.
It was great. I loved it. The first tour, I think the first tour was about 7 weeks. Now I was home for 6 and then back out there for 9, then home for 3, then out there for another 5 to 6 weeks or so.
Yeah.
And the first tour, I was in this complete honeymoon period where I was like, this is amazing, and then the second tour I came back and it was like, I guess some of that had kind of like worn off a little bit. And I was like, okay. Do you know what I mean? And because I was rooming with Pac, Neville, we were literally living out of each other's shadows for the entire time. And we really started to grate on each other after a while. And it's hard when you're in a country where, nobody speaks your language and the only person who you can speak to is a Geordie, so he doesn't speak the language really either. And then you fall out with that.
No offense to Geordies if you're watching, by the way.
I'm joking. I'm saying it with love. But, we fell out, but, we always resolved our issues. And, I think we've both matured a lot in recent years, and it's been great to see his career go on, because you knew back then, this guy's going to be a megastar. Like, this guy's got it down, he came to train at the old academy that I trained at. And at the time we'd heard a lot of things like, oh, this guy's going to be huge. This guy's going to be a star. And then he walked in and he kind of looked like a hobbit at the time, because he had short curly hair, and we were like, this guy, you know, and then like you saw him wrestle and you're like, yeah, he's going to be like amazing, you know, like, yeah, he's, you know, capable of doing things that you could, you know, you have no idea how is that even physically possible, you know, and yeah, it was great learning from him and getting to, you know, learn the Japanese style as well. You know, they have Dragon Gate seem to have this hybrid Japanese Mexican style because they were taught by luchadors, so there's a lot of elements of that is part of their style. And yeah, like you said, 70 matches. Wow, I didn't even realize it was that. It was a lot though. I know I literally got to work their entire roster. So and being in different going from town to town, you saw how they did things differently. You know, it's just invaluable experience that, you know, you see how a wrestling company works and how it evolves and how it moves when they have things like TV or pay-per-view and then house shows and stuff like that. Like, it's a completely different animal.
Yeah, 100%. And I know that a lot's changed since then. You've got a family, you've got children. You're back over here in the UK. But you know, if the opportunity came up to maybe do a short tour of Japan, maybe for Dragon Gate, maybe for somebody else, would you be interested in that proposition?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, my son is he loves Japanese. You know, he wants to learn the language. You know, he's into, what is it? Some manga, I think, and you know, he's always telling me about you know, different things that, you know, that he's seen that are somehow related to Japan. So I think that, you know, maybe like a year, like when I was a kid, I was like, you know, I would have loved to have spent a year in a foreign country or something, and, you know, just have that different life experience. And yeah, I think it would be a great opportunity to go back there. It'd be cool to go back and see some old faces, see who's still kicking about.
Absolutely. We've still got more to get into, but we've got some listener questions that have come through in the last few minutes or so. Mark Lloyd has been in touch via YouTube, and I think he's asking, in 1PW, you will be facing Hammerstone. What do you think to seeing Burridge back just announced tonight? Would you like to add any context to that? Do you know? Are you scheduled to be performing for 1PW?
Yes, yeah.
Against Hammerstone.
It'll be coming up in, when is it? In October. But
yes.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll be facing Hammerstone. I kind of feel like we'd look like we're one of those Russian dolls, you know, where you open one lady and there's a smaller one inside, but it'd just be kind of like a Viking-looking, hairy, blonde man, just getting smaller and smaller. And in regards to Burridge being back, until you asked me that question, I had no idea that was even a thing. So yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what he's like nowadays.
Absolutely. And we've got Amber Joe, who's been in touch. What advice would you give someone on their very first international booking?
Travel light. You know, I have like a kind of like a routine going through the airport where, like, I have my bum bag with me, you know, like one of those travel bags. And I put everything in there just so it's very easy when it comes to going through the scanners and such. You know, wear comfortable clothing. Like, depending on how long your flight's going to be, you're going to want to be, you know, relatively comfortable and as stress-free and as easy as you can do. So just be prepared. Like, have anything that you need to take out of your bag in a very easy position. So, you know, things like toiletries and that don't like stick at the bottom, because otherwise you're going to be stood in a queue for ages. Just basically have everything ready and take a good book as well, because you have no idea how long you're going to be stuck in an airport or on a flight for.
Absolutely. I want to touch on your TNA experience, if you don't mind, because I believe you did their European tour the early beginnings of 2011, and then you did some shows for them. I don't know if you were signed or not that summer, and then you did their European tour the following winter in 2012. We all know that you suffered an injury in your Wembley match against Austin Aries. But if you were to kind of look back, I think it's 10 or more years on now, how would you kind of sum up your TNA experience, your highs, your lows, and anything you can take from that experience?
I learned a lot. I guess that would be the best way to describe it. It was, like any of these experiences are very bizarre, you know. Like, even then when we were just talking about Dragon Gate, I was thinking like, I was working like Shingo Takagi on like literally a weekly basis. Do you know what I mean? Now
pretty mind-blowing. Yeah.
Right. And, you know, you kind of look back, you're like, oh, okay, I was working, you know, guys like Pac and and Shingo regularly. You know, with TNA, the first night that I had there, we had a house show in, I think it was Lyon, France. And I was expecting them just to put me in there with somebody to see how I did, or, you know, see what I was capable of. And I was in the ring and I was looking around, and it was Shannon Moore and myself versus Jeff Jarrett and Matt Hardy, with Kurt Angle as a special guest referee. And I was like, wow, this is
yeah.
This is a surreal moment. And then the tour continued. I got to work Frankie Kazarian and Chris Sabin, I think, pretty much every night up until I think I had a singles match with Shannon Moore, and then I had a tag match, Magnus and myself versus Beer Money at Wembley, in front of, I think it was about 10,000 fans or so, for the TNA Tag Team Championships. And yeah, they offered me the contract. It took a few months, as in these cases a lot of things seem to, and then finally got to go out there in July. Did a few tapings. You know, I would hang out backstage with, this might be a bit mind-blowing, but I used to hang out backstage with Alex Shelley and Okada, because they had nothing for us. So we would just, you know, sit around, you know, get up to trouble, get up to no good, you know, and just spend time together. And then, you know, especially when was it, just before the pandemic, I got to wrestle Alex Shelley again, and we were so happy that we'd been in that place where we were like, okay, we're being you feel kind of neglected, right? You know, and then you go from that to then being like, okay, now we've been given some time to go out there on a Ring of Honor pay-per-view and you know, do what we can do. Do you know what I'm saying? So it was cool to have that sense of redemption that, you know, it finally paid off, you know, much further down the line. And he's a great dude as well. Like, you know, he's such an absolute sweetheart, bless him. So it's cool to you know, to see him still kicking about and still doing his thing, because I think the Motor City Machine Guns were one of the most underrated tag teams ever. You know, they're absolutely phenomenal, and without those guys, I think they affected professional wrestling more than what we realized they did. You know, from that sort of era moving forward to now. There's so many guys in the back there all the time that they're talking about, like, oh yeah, I used to love watching TNA, and the Machine Guns were one of my faves, you know, and like they're now guys that are out there absolutely killing it. So and then just through TNA, it was like I said, it was a learning experience, and you know, I think that like no matter what it is that you go through, no matter what it is that you do, you're always going to look back and have regrets and think, how could I have done this differently? How could I have made this more successful? How could I have, you know, developed or whatever? But at the end of the day, you know, I'm proud of the person I am now, and all the routes that I've taken, all the roads that I've gone down have led me to who I am now. So it played a role in that in some kind of capacity, and I'm grateful that I had that opportunity when I did.
Absolutely. Now, I was first introduced to indie wrestling, British indie wrestling, at the back end of 2014. And I remember seeing you for the first time in the flesh. It was at a 4FW show in Swindon about May 2015. And you wrestled, I don't know if you've heard of this individual, a certain guy by the name of Will Ospreay. What's he done with himself since, eh? But it was yourself versus Will Ospreay at a 4FW show in Swindon 2015. A hell of a match. I've got to say, you went over in the match as well. But 2014, 2015, that was kind of like the beginnings of British wrestling UK, the UK indie scene becoming pretty much the hottest scene in the world as far as I was concerned. You know, going into 2016, 2017, 2018, everybody was talking about UK wrestling. And that kind of time period was so special, wasn't it? And like I say, 2014, 2015, when I started getting into indie wrestling, was real kind of, it felt like the birth of something special. Yeah,
absolutely. And, you know, when I broke in, so my first match was in 2006, and I think it was around 2008 that the global recession hit. So and it hit wrestling hard, you know, and I'd never thought that wrestling would develop to like a decent standard in this country again. I thought that was it. So when the British scene started to boom and all this mad stuff started to happen, it really took me by surprise. You know, like I just never anticipated it. But I think that it was just, there was a lot of the right people at the right time. You know, there were guys like John Bridie, who was a successful promoter in different areas, and he then wanted to apply himself to wrestling. And, you know, having guys like Jim Smallman on board, like I feel like Jim Smallman was such an underrated piece of the puzzle of progress. You know, I really feel like he made it, you know, he's a huge part in why it has been as successful as it is. And, you know, then seeing Progress go on to, you know, it started off in the garage in front of 350 fans, and it went to being in the ballroom in front of 700 fans. And then, you know, just continued to progress. Brixton, 2,500, Dally Pally, you know, 3,000, 4,000, whatever it is. And
Wembley Arena,
5,000 fans. You know what I'm saying? Like it's absolute madness. You know, US tours. You know, multiple dates in America. It's been absolutely insane. Like I never anticipated any of you know, British wrestling, especially seeing where it came from. Just not anticipating that anything would develop to that kind of to that level. So it was great to see, great to be a part of, and continually mind-blowing. You're like, oh wow, like, you know, this is happening. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, and like you said, like around 2014, 2015, it felt like it really started to build momentum, you know, like you know, new fans started to come in. They, you know, had never heard of it before, and you know, didn't realize that wrestling was literally on their doorstep. And then there was this new wave of talent that was coming through. And I feel that now we're kind of in a very similar position where it's kind of like, it's a lot of undiscovered talents that are starting to build, that are going to start building momentum. You know, we're less than a year back from where shows have even started sort of coming back. And I think that within the next year or two, like, I think that we're going to be back on the up. And I think that as long as the right people are present, as long as the right people are involved, I think that British wrestling really has a chance of you know, reaching those heights again.
I'm glad you said that, because that's going to be one of my questions for later on. And I'm like I say, I'm glad that your perspective and vision is that British wrestling is definitely on the up, and will hopefully reach them heights again. But just touching on Progress, and I know that I think one promotion that you're very synonymous with is Progress, and I think you debuted for them Chapter 7. I think your last match for them was Chapter 100. So that kind of demonstrates, you know, how loyal you were to Progress and how great they were for your career, and vice versa. You were their world champion as well in 2016. But if you were to sum up kind of, you know, your Progress experience and your love for Progress and why it was so special to you, how would you be able to sum that up?
It's like having a really annoying little brother that you love but scream at. No, I don't know. Like, it's yeah, like I said, like it was such it felt like it was a phenomenon at one point. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it just continued to evolve, it continued to grow. You know, and yeah, like I remember I got an email through for their very first show. And at the time, you know, we'd never anticipated that running shows in London would really draw, you know. And I remember they were saying like, oh, we're going to be running shows in London. And I was like, good luck with that. And then, you know, from the first show, like there seemed to be this buzz about it. You know, people were talking about it. People were like, oh, this is something real special. And I was like, oh, damn. And then I continued to see, you know, a few more shows. I was like, oh, this is actually doing pretty well. And then fortunately they brought me in. I guess it was Chapter 7, right? And
I think that's right. Yeah.
I have no idea. I get hit in the head for a living, so you know, my memory is not the best. But yeah, from that point on, yeah, just continue to be a part of their shows and just try to apply myself in, you know, the best way that I could, and continue to evolve and continue to change. And around the start of, so at the end of 2014, I took some time off to you know, I had some niggling injuries, and when I came back in 2015, I felt like it was a real new, fresh start for me. You know, it was a time where I started doing a lot of things differently. And Progress was one of those places where I, you know, had the opportunity to, you know, really step up my game and work talent and work guys in an environment which I felt was fitting to what it was that I wanted to
Yeah.
you know, sort of deliver, that I wanted to, you know, be able to provide. And yeah, just so much good talent. Like I think back, like at those matches I had, I remember like when Will Ospreay first won the championship, it was the only match that was announced for the following show was him and me, and it sold out in 30 minutes, you know, and like something like that was just unheard of at the time. Like, you know, you just didn't anticipate it. And then I think after the month after that, I worked Tommaso Ciampa. Then, you know, I think a few months after that, I wrestled, I think, Johnny Gargano, and, you know, guys like Pete Dunne, and, you know, just just on the regular, you're wrestling just, you know, guys who have gone on to be so successful in this industry, you know, and that people are now really starting to realize how good this talent is. And you look back at that time and you think, wow, that's insane that those were just regular shows that were happening. Do you know what I mean? Stacked from top to bottom, like, you know, just insane talent. And getting to travel around, you know, and we got to, for example, when we did the American tour, we wrestled a show for Progress in the ECW arena on my wife's birthday. And, you know, experiences like that, they're, you know, golden. If you told me that when I was a teenager, you know, oh, you're going to get to do the ECW arena and, you know, do it on your birthday, I'd be like, wow, that would be amazing. Do you know what I mean? You know, certain other things as well. Like, you know, years ago, there was a documentary on Progress and my son was involved in it where we went for a walk up the hills and they asked him, you know, what do you like to do up here? And one thing that he used to love to do was he'd find a stick and pretend it was a gun. And then because he was dinosaur mad at the time, he would always be like, you know, he'd pretend we were shooting dinosaurs. And, you know, they asked him, what do you like to do here? And he's like, I like to chill out here and shoot dinosaurs. And then that became the name of a show. And sure enough, I was like, well, look, if I'm ever going to do a WrestleMania entrance, this is it. Do you know what I mean? I'm getting my son booked. So I told John Bridie, the promoter, I said, hey, look, can I force a trainee into a dinosaur outfit and then shoot him with my son? And they were totally on board with it. So, we found somebody on the day who was willing enough to be shot by a 3-year-old child. And it was so funny because we go out and we come out and do the special entrance. And this was the thing that really pissed me off. And this is where I'm talking about it being like the annoying little brother that you love, but you shout at, right? Like, I have given like Progress so many ideas across the years, right? So anyway, a few days before the show, I was trying to like, you know, get Jack like open to the idea that he was going to walk out in front of, you know, 700 people on a show. And I was like, oh yes, we're going to come out. You come out with Daddy, then we shoot a dinosaur, then we go to the ring. And he's like, yeah, I want the Jurassic Park theme. And I was like, no, you come out to my theme. He's like, no, I want the Jurassic Park theme. And I was like, all right. So like I dropped Bridie a message, just, you know, joking, being like, oh, Jack's demanding his own theme music. What a prima donna. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, then we get to the show on the day and, you know, Bridie's like, okay, so I've got the Jurassic Park theme lined up. And I was like, what? Like, how? Like, you know, why is it that my ideas get shot down and yet my son gets his own show named after him and his own, you know, gimmick entrance? So we come out, we shoot a dinosaur, we get to the ring. My son turns to me and he's like, Daddy, who do I fight? I'm like, you're going with Mama to sit in the crowd. He's like, oh, I wanted to wrestle. And then we, afterwards, as we're leaving, I get him to say thank you. And he goes up to John. He's like, thank you for letting me shoot a dinosaur. And he's like, oh, you're welcome. And then Jack just looks at him and goes, yeah, next time I'll do Star Wars. And then just walks out. I was like, man, this kid's a pro. He's even got the return booking as well. He's, I should be learning from him, really.
Oh, 100%. What a great story. I absolutely love that. I got to talk to you about ROH now. And I know you got signed, was it at the end of 2018, beginning of 2019? But Madison Square Garden, WrestleMania weekend, must have been a dream come true to have been performing in that, you know, historic, prestigious sporting venue, walking them hallowed halls, stepping out into a sold-out Madison Square Garden. That must have kind of really got you as a fan and as a pro wrestler thinking, yeah, this is heaven right now.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I grew up, you know, watching so many different tapes from Madison Square Garden. I was like, I have to wrestle here one day. And I remember one of my favorite matches there was from the Royal Rumble 2000, where Jeff Hardy, the Hardy Boys versus the Dudley Boys in a tables match, and Jeff Hardy jumping off, it was like a balcony or something.
He jumped off. Was it where they entered the entrance stage, wasn't it? Yeah.
It was the opposite of the entrance. It looked identical too, but it was like, I guess it was just a different part of the arena that was kind of set up the same for when it's, you know, say like a hockey game or something. And you know, they anyway, or a basketball game rather. So anyway, so when he I always watch it, and then getting to wrestle Bully Ray at Madison Square Garden, I was like, this is pretty mad. Do you know what I mean? You know, me as a child would be losing my mind right now. Do you know? And like I was going around the venue all day trying to figure out, where is this bit or where's that bit? And because we had a street fight or some kind of hardcore match Juice Robinson and I were going through the venue trying to find anything that we could use as a weapon just to, to lamp somebody with. And that wooden crate that you can see stacked up in the corner there, we actually found in, I think, some kind of dumpster truck in the very, bowels of the building. We went and scavenged everything that we could that could possibly be used to hit somebody with. And funny enough, so my wife was with me. And after the match, I thought I knew where she was, so I was blowing kisses to her, and it turned out she was sat in a completely different area of the crowd. So I was like, "Well, I hope I made some fans night."
Oh, fantastic! Absolutely fantastic. I do have another question that's came through before we went live, as a matter of fact, from Dennis Day Jr. via Facebook. What was it like working with Bully Ray and having your feud culminate at Final Battle?
Yeah, it was great. It was, you don't realize like how big he is until you stand next to him, and he's just kind of like a skyscraper where it just feels like he just keeps going and going. Do you know what I mean?
He's a big old dude. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And funnily enough, so a story I guess I can talk about from my feud with Final Battle. I don't know if you can see it there. Not really, but so I've got like a very faint scar down this finger that cost Ring of Honor probably in excess of 10 to 20 grand, right? Now, the Maryland Athletic State Commission has a strict no blood policy. And of course, we're having an extreme match with barbed wire, right? So I end up taking a powerbomb off the top rope onto a table that didn't break. So then Bully splashes me through the table. And as I'm crawling out of it, I end up cutting my finger and bleeding. And sure enough, then, the Maryland Athletic State Commission were not happy. So, Ring of Honor, bless him, Joe Koff, he took the entire fine. He said, look, this isn't going to, reflect badly on you guys. We asked you to do this match. We're picking up the bill for it. We're picking up the tab. So I just got left with, a scar on my finger from the story of, the battles with Bully Ray and, the lesson that you do not fuck with the Maryland Athletic State Commission.
Oh, absolutely. We've got another question that's come through. Let me just bring it up here if I can. Good question, this from Anthony Russell. Do you prefer working face or heel?
So I like working face because the merchandise money is great. And I like working heel because if you've had a really shit day, it's such a great way to blow off some steam. So back when I was first starting out and I loved being a heel. It was there's something just very therapeutic about getting to act like an utter asshole and being paid for it. So it was a lot of fun, but man, like I don't necessarily have a preference of one or the other. I feel like one of the best things that you can be in any industry is versatile. Do you know what I mean? And being able to adapt and to evolve and being able to change to your surroundings. So I really don't mind. Either way, I end up enjoying the experience. And when you do something and you enjoy doing it, then you don't have an issue with it either way. I'm not one of these people that needs people to cheer me, to feed my ego or anything like that. Do you know what I'm saying? Like I'm more than happy to go out there and just be a total dick and people, be able to shout at me, as long as you enjoy everything in the scheme of things, that's the main thing.
Absolutely. I noticed on one of your Instagram posts, you said that despite having been in the business for as long as you have, you've never been 100% satisfied with a single performance and maybe never will be. Why do you think that is? And do you think that that's kind of helped to drive you to be the ultimate professional that you are now, never being satisfied with your performances, constantly driving you to try and up your game every time you go out there?
Yeah, I think it just comes from being a perfectionist. I think it's equally a blessing and a curse. On one hand, it continues to make you strive to do better. It makes you strive to, like I said, continue to evolve, continue to change, continue to apply yourself in the best way that you can. But also on the flip side, like it's very rare that you ever have a moment where you can sit back and really appreciate or enjoy, what you've done, and wrestling's one of these, wrestling can be very unrewarding at times where you go out there and you really bust your ass, and you have like you have consistently good matches, and when you get through the curtain, you're like, oh, how was that? And they were like, yeah, it was all right. And you're like, it was all right. Like, I've just I've just risked my life to try and put on a performance for you, and it's okay. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I think in some regards, it can be like that. On the other hand, it could be, super rewarding. Like, it's one that is like anything in life, there's ups and downs, and, you get out of the experience, whatever it is that you kind of, I feel like sometimes what you look for. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, if you look for a reason for people to, think that you could do better, you'll always see that element of things, like, and it's always been really important for me to never like get to a point where I think that I couldn't do better. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I always think like, okay, no matter how I could have the most perfect match ever, and I'll still think, I don't like the way I flicked my hair there. I'll have to change that next time or something, like I'm always trying to look at what's that next thing that I can do to step up my game. What's the next thing that I can do to change this or change that? And I think
challenging yourself and never being satisfied.
I think that if there's ever a point where you think that you couldn't be working harder, you're lying to yourself. Like, there's always a way for you to take things to the next level, and I think, like I said, like, that can be a good thing because it continues to inspire you. It continues to, make you do better, but it can also do the opposite, where it kind of feels like, it can sort of eat you alive at times, where you feel like no matter what you do, it just isn't good enough, And I think that it's important to just try and enjoy the little, enjoy the moment more, like when my friend Chris Travis died, he said one of the things, and it always stuck with me, when he said that one of the things that he wished he'd done was just live in the moment more and just enjoy the moment and what it was he was going through, and not worry about what was next or what was to come, or, all this different stuff, but to just try and sit back and, take everything in. And, he got to work a lot of his idols, and he was too busy worrying about this or that or whatever, and like, didn't really take the time to appreciate where he was. And I think that it's important to do that like, equally, you have to sort of walk this line where you do continue to improve, and continue to better yourself, but at the same time, you have to kind of appreciate where you are and enjoy what it is that you're going through.
Of course. Couple more quick questions that have come through from James Nation. Where do you prefer to wrestle, the MSG or the National Stadium in Ireland? I think I know where he's going to go.
Oh man, I love both. Madison Square Garden was. I came out of that like buzzing on a real high. And National Stadium, it was one of the shows I got to do for TNA. During the house show loop that I did, I wrestled in one of the opening matches. So now getting to go back there and be main event and being the featured match and OTT World Championship match, like, it's a cool experience for me that it is gone from one extreme to the other. Do you know what I'm saying? So both hold sentiment in my heart, and I wish I could choose one over the other, but I'm going to give you the most political answer that I can.
Very diplomatic. Here we go.
Yeah, this is my first rodeo.
Voxel X has been in touch, watching live via YouTube, so thank you. Who are your favorite tag teams to wrestle as part of the Thrillers with Joel Redman?
Gosh, who did I wrestle? That's taken me back some time. I remember wrestling the Cartel. That was quite fun. They were they were a handful, bless them. But no, them and who was it? We had a really good match with the Knights, Roy and Zach Knight at York Hall. And that was fun. Like, some people have apprehensions working the Knights, but like, I always kind of see it as like, I don't know, it's kind of more exciting, like in a lot of ways, because if you enjoy sort of, like I said, like living in the moment and being very reactionary, then, they're great, because you never quite know what's going to happen. I think the first time that I wrestled Roy Knight, I got suplexed for a merchandise table, and which I definitely wasn't anticipating. And I was like, screw this. I was a heel at the time. So I was like, you know what, he's either going to appreciate this or he's going to hate it and he's going to kill me, but it's going to be entertaining for everybody to watch. So I got up with a DVD and just cracked him over the head with it. And I heard him say under like his voice, he's like, yeah, do it again. I'm like, all right. So I can pick up another one, crack him with it. He's like, do it again. So I get like 2 and I'm just beating him over the head with these DVDs. And then before I know it, I go crashing through another merchandise table. And, it's one of those things where like, I think like if you, like I always enjoyed play fighting with my friends as a kid, and it has a very sort of like reminiscent feel of that, where like you don't really know what's going to happen, but you're probably going to end up breaking a light bulb or smashing your mum's furniture or something like that. And it's very similar thing working with the Knights. You never quite know what to expect until it happens.
Absolutely, got nothing but love for the Knight family. You spent Saturday with Zach Knight and RKJ, Tony Knight, and PJ Knight over here in Westbury at Immortal. Fantastic match, fantastic guys, great to talk to as well. Who would you say are some of your most influential people that you've been around that's maybe inspired you as a pro, and maybe kind of inspired you as a performer, I suppose? Any pros or people within the business? Pardon me?
People that I've actually spent time with?
I would say so, yeah.
That's a good question. I think there's lots of people that influence me in different ways, like, my wife is one, obviously, who, we have a lot of differing opinions in some things. So it's I like to surround myself with somebody, and people that have a different opinion to me, because then it makes me think different. Do you know what I mean? It makes me think, I didn't necessarily think of that. You know what I mean? Like it makes me see things from a different perspective. I hate being around people that just always agree with you, because then you'll only ever think how you think. Like it's very hard to think outside the box when you only ever hear sort of one, narrative as such. So I'd say, Vic is definitely one who, she might see something that I don't, or, she might suggest something like, think of it this way or something. I'm like, I hadn't even like contemplated that. Do you know what I mean? Gosh, people Joey Mercury in a strange way, because we've spent a lot of time together in Ring of Honor, and like he's absolute just insane genius. Like it was where I realized and saw it for firsthand that like genius kind of rides genius rides the crest of the wave of crazy. And it's sure. This weird like kind of pull where it's like, is he crazy or is he genius, or is it the same thing? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, he was somebody that could see things that you didn't even, once again, that you couldn't necessarily think about, or it didn't even necessarily see. You're like, oh, wow, well, there's a different dimension to that or something. And just as a person makes you realize exactly how you don't want to turn out in life. So, now bless him. I haven't spoken to him in a while, but, Joey, he was... he was one of those guys where I think you either loved him or hated him, and he was a lot of fun. I remember spending a lot of time with Joey and laughing so hard that I thought my lungs were going to burst. So they're definitely two people that I think have influenced me a lot.
What about this guy then, Mark? William Regal.
Billy Rex.
You mentioned him on an Instagram post that he pulled you to one side and had a chat with you after a PWG show. What was your interaction like with Regal?
I've had quite a few interactions with Regal, and it's weird because there seems to be this like pre-existing unspoken like bond of just being British, right? Like you can go to a big American company and you can kind of speak to people, and you feel like some people there's like some kind of distance to kind of like find a mutual ground on, and then Regal has walked down many of the roads that we have. Do you know what I'm saying? Like he's worked for a lot of the old school promoters that are still kicking about, and it has impressions of, and you all kind of have stories of that you can kind of mingle together. And when I came through in what the mid 2000s, in 2006, 2007, there was a good handful of like that old school guys kind of coming through. Guys like John Fremantle, who ran Premier Promotions down on the South Coast. It was a very traditional British wrestling show. Like there would only be 4 matches. It was all rounds. It was the crowd that were there, and obviously it felt like they'd followed it. They'd become fans during like the 70s or 80s and never left. So like it felt like this completely different world. And there was a lot of talent there, old school wrestlers like Steve Gray, guys like Johnny Kidd. who were, you know, still kicking about, who were obviously there when Regal was coming through. So it was, like this, I don't know, like it is weird. Like, you know, some people you can just almost instantly relate to because you've been through sort of similar, you know, situations or work for the same promoters. And he was definitely one of those guys where, like, that picture was taken for PWG out in California. Do you know what I mean? And you're the other side of the earth, and you're talking to somebody about, you know, about cups of tea in Coronation Street. You know, or, you know, maybe not necessarily those things, but like, for example,
I know what you mean.
Is very much very sort of, you know, the very kind of like homely feeling to some extent.
Of course. And as we start to wind down, as I mentioned to you off air, on Friday, I interviewed Yeston Reese live on the Wrestling with John's podcast. And you was a guest on one of his YouTube videos, Bench Pressing Questions. I think he's had Will Ospreay, Dan Maloney, Roy Johnson, and yourself, and you actually got him to take the ice bath, didn't you? The ice bucket. Now, one question that I neglected to ask yesterday on Friday was, how did he cope in the ice? And I'm going to ask you, Mark, how was Yeston in that ice cold water? Did he adapt to it? Was he okay? Tell us how he got on in that ice bucket.
No, he cried. No, I'm joking. He actually did really well. Yeah, I wish I could show him up and tell you how he wussed out, but he didn't. He did 10 minutes straight in.
He's a top man.
He endured it. And in that picture there, his body's almost as red as my hoodie, you know. And so one thing that I definitely realized during the pandemic was how much of a weirdo I am. And rather than sort of deny it anymore, I just kind of endorsed it. And like I said earlier, like, you know, I did so many different things, you know, and ice therapy and cold water immersion was definitely one of them. You know, like I discovered Wim Hof and his breathing technique, and, you know, the cold water immersion. And it was something I started to implement into my daily routine. You know, there were parts, months where I would get up at 5 a.m. and jump into a cold barrel. It would be the first thing that I did. And, you know, I think the lowest temperature that I ever recorded was like 0.6 degrees. So, you know, during, a few months ago, I think it was like around January, where we had a big storm come through from Russia. Like Russia got the blame for the storm. And, you know, you weren't allowed to travel. Like they were saying, like, stay in, you can't travel anywhere, you know, like, don't go outside, it's a storm. So that was, of course, the weekend that I traveled to Scotland and back. And it was one of the easiest, like, you know, road journeys I'd ever had. Like, there was a bit of snow on the grass on, you know, the verge, and that was pretty much it, you know. Like, it was pretty you know, easy road. So went to Scotland and back, and when we got back, the ice barrel had frozen over, so I had to break the ice to get into it. And that was where it was the lowest temperature that it had been. But you know what, there's something about, for me personally, there's something about getting into cold water that, like, you know, teaches you just a different aspect of yourself. Because what you're doing is actually quite easy, in the sense of you're just sat there, right? You're just sat there for 10 minutes, and all you've got to do is just count your breaths and, you know, do different sort of breathing exercises and such. But the environment that you're in, being in, you know, like the cold, and like the immense cold as well, like, you have to figure out your own internal dialogue to, you know, help you, you know, to really endure it, you know. And there's been times, like, I did a show a few months ago up in Newcastle for North Wrestling, and I was like, you know, I'm on the road, but I don't want to lose out on doing cold water therapy. So I found a beach that was on my route up to Scotland, and it was in Bamber, near Bamber Castle, right? So it's you know, the northeast corner of the country, and I go up, and it's a January morning, like, people are in their coats and like walking their dogs on the beach. I'm there in a little pair of swim shorts, and I go and jump in the water and sit there huffing and puffing for 20 minutes, right? And by the time I got out, I just felt like I achieved something. Like, I don't know what it was, but I definitely achieved something where I was like, okay, like, you know, I've managed to talk myself through like 20 minutes here. Like, you know, if I can do this, I can do anything. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's, you know, it's something known as top-down control. Is like, if you can control your breath, you can control your heart rate. If you can control your heart rate, that's where you control your mind, you know. And learning little things like this, I feel, have definitely helped me when coming back to wrestling. because I feel like looking back at my career, there's been so many opportunities where I feel like maybe anxiety got the better of me, or maybe, the voice in my head that said, oh, you probably shouldn't do that, or you shouldn't do this, or whatever, kind of like managed to win and take over. Whereas like, a lot of the time, these fears that you have, like these worries of whatever, are completely, they never happen. Do you know what I mean? Like, look at 5 years ago, could we predict that 2020 would have happened the way it did? No. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's, during that time, there's been so many people across the years that have told me, oh, you should get a job that's secure or something. And like, if 2020 taught us anything, it was that nothing is secure. Like nothing, is always, going to necessarily last. Like people who had been to university, who had spent years, training to get degrees, that like had jobs that they felt that were, that were secure, weren't. Do you know what I mean? As soon as they find themselves, without a job, they find themselves, in predicaments where they're, hungry or having to, borrow money and all these things. And I feel that like you can never accurately predict what's around the corner, but what you can do is influence the outcome that you desire. Do you know, if you tackle every situation the best way that you can, if you tackle every situation with being like, I'm going to make the best out of this opportunity, no matter what it is, and if you always if you shoot for the stars and you miss, at least you'll still end up amongst them. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, 100%. All you can ever do is the best with every opportunity that you're faced with. And, that certain things like doing cold water therapy is, something that I feel like it kind of helped me just, realize certain aspects like that, just taking it one breath at a time. Do you know what I'm saying? Like not thinking, okay, I'm going to spend 20 minutes in freezing cold water, but just thinking like, okay, I'm just going to do one round of, the Wim Hof breathing technique. And then once I've done that, I'm like, okay, now I'm going to do another round. And before you know it, that stacks up. And when you do it on, habit and on repeat, suddenly before you know it, you're 90 days in, and you've spent every morning, first thing that you've done is gone and jumped into a barrel of cold water and spent between 10 to 20 minutes in it. Do you know what I mean? And it does something to your psyche. Like it has a lot of good, physical effects. And
is it good for muscle repair or anything like that?
So there's some sort of debate in regards to what it does for muscular repair. There's some studies that suggest that if you do it directly after a workout, it actually hinders muscle growth. Right. But then that isn't necessarily a bad thing, depending on what your goal is. If you're a cage fighter and you're looking not to become big and bulky because you need to be, trim enough that you can, escape certain, holds or whatever, then obviously you want to maximize your strength with gaining the least amount of weight as possible. You know what I'm saying? So there's, it really depends on what your goal is, but Eddie Hall was somebody who I follow, and one of his recovery days was, one of the things that he would do is hot and cold therapy, where he'd spend 10 minutes in the hot, 5 minutes in the cold, and repeat that 3 or 4 times. So I would run myself a hot bath upstairs, which would be about 40 degrees. And then I'd go outside and jump into the cold barrel, which would be whatever the weather was outside. Yeah. And it's pretty much always less than 10 degrees. And it could range, like I remember, so I actually sized up. So the barrel that you saw Yestin in there, the barrel that I had before him, it wouldn't have fit him in it. Like it was a much smaller barrel. But that was another time where I'd have to break the ice to jump in. And, you spend 5 minutes in there and you come out and you're bright red. Do you know what I mean? And there was a time where at the end of 2020, going into 2021, I was getting up at 3 a.m. and going to the gym and training from sort of like 3:30 till 6 a.m., right? And we were doing something called SEAL Fit, which is a US Navy SEAL cross hybrid workout with CrossFit, right? And one morning I was deadlifting and just something went in my lower back. And I was like, this is bad. I'm going to be out for months, right? I was anticipating like, this really isn't good. I couldn't even stand up straight. It was so bad. So I came home and I foam rolled, I stretched, and I did hot and cold therapy. I do, 10 minutes in the hot, 5 minutes in the cold. Within a week, I was back in the gym. Like it did something. Do you know Incredible. What I mean? Like, I think that there's still a lot of sort of science going into what like it does or doesn't necessarily do. But also one thing as well is like, usually if you believe that something works, it does work. Like there's such a, I think it's something ridiculous, like 30 to 40% of medicine is all based off of the placebo effect. And, you don't realize how powerful your mind actually is. And if you believe that something works, then a lot of the time that placebo effect will end up, taking over to at least some extent, and will, at least help you in some regard. So, whatever it is that you think, like the saying, like, if you believe you can or you can't, you're right. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you just kind of end up finding your way. And, the other thing as well is, like, I think that it's important to try things and to see what it is that you take away from it. Do you know what I mean? Like, and for me, like, the past, 2 years or so has been a real time of, self-discovery and mental toughening, and, really kind of just, I guess, redeveloping myself, and just kind of, seeing, okay, well, what does this do? Or what does that do? What does running through a storm over hills do for you? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, taking on all these challenges that, I wouldn't have necessarily taken on, myself. Like, the other day I got my wife to drop me off. I wanted to run from one end of the Malvern Hills to the other, and I think it was about 16 kilometers or so. And she was late for an appointment, so I got her to drop me off somewhere, en route. So I had these barefoot shoes, which are basically like where they have like zero or very little padding on the bottom, so it gives you the feeling of being barefoot, but at least protects your foot enough. And I had a weight vest on, and I ran, I think it was about 5 kilometers just to get to my starting point. And then whatever the hardest route was, that was the route I was taking, because I didn't want to let there be any excuses. Do you know what I'm saying? I was like, I'm going to take the hardest route, and I'm going to put myself through this. And by the end of it, when I was on the hill coming back down to my house, like, I physically couldn't run anymore. Do you know what I mean? Like, I had to walk. Like, I'd be able to run a few steps, and then I'd just stop. And this was all before I'd had breakfast. Do you know what I'm saying? So it was like, you're putting yourself through, these experiences that, you find out, like, who you are. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you find out this different layer of what's underneath. Do you know what I mean? Like, you find out, like, do you have this drive or don't you? Do you know what I mean? Like, are you going to talk to yourself in a way that is going to get you through something? Are you going to talk to yourself and be like, no, come on, just a few more steps. Okay, get to that point. All right, get to that next point. Do you know what I mean? Like, you have to, you kind of realize that only really by doing this, you're like, okay, it's kind of easier when you break it down and you think, okay, I'm just going to run up this slope here. And then you're like, okay, no, I was just going to go a bit further. And okay, and like, before you know it, you've done the whole thing. Do you know what I'm saying? Whereas, like we were kind of touched on earlier, talking about, aspiring pro wrestlers, is, too often you're focusing on so much stuff that isn't necessary. Do you know what I mean? Like, all you have to do is just take it one step at a time. Okay, how can you be better than you were yesterday? Okay, how do you groom certain mindsets that will help you? Do you know what I mean? Like, when you go through things like cold water therapy on a morning basis, day after day after day, you find like a way to be resilient. Do you know what I mean? Like, you find a way to endure these things. You find a way where, you manage to talk yourself through, an uncomfortable, situation, but come out the other end of it. And when you come out the other end of it, like, you feel so much more of a sense of like, damn, like, I feel like I did something here. Do you know what I mean? Like, when I did the 4x4x48, I did that a second time. Vic and I think it was a week before the last national stadium show for OTT. I ran 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours straight. Vic worked out 40 minutes every 4 hours for 4 hours straight. We did like 2-hour intervals. So I would go at, say, 8, she would go at 10. Do you know what I mean? And like, before you know it, like, you're running off of very little sleep, because each other's alarms wake each other up. And, you learn something new about yourself where, you didn't necessarily learn it the first time, like, and, it's like these little challenges. We raised, I think, over £1,000 for charity.
That's phenomenal.
It was an abuse charity. So thank you for everybody that reached out and donated, and followed our journey over that weekend. And, it's just, I feel like the most important thing in life is experience. Do you know what I mean? Like, if bad experiences can, even help mold you if it's for the better. If you choose to take the, what's the best thing I can take away from the situation? Like, one thing that's happening for me personally at the moment. So at the start of the year, so this is the year that I've had so far. So start of the year, lose my job with Ring of Honor. By the end of January, find out that my dad's got stage 4 cancer and has a few months left to live. I suffered one of the worst concussions that I've ever had at the National Stadium show, and then catch COVID probably at the hospital, getting checked out for the concussion. And so far it's April, and that's been what's happened in 4 months. Do you know what I'm saying? And in regards to my dad, like, seeing the situation, it's like, it sucks, like I told him, I'm going to be heartbroken, regardless of when he dies, whether that's, in a few months, whether that's in a few years.
Sure.
It's the result is going to be the same, but I'll deal with that when I get to that. And the best thing that I can do is just enjoy the time that I have left with him. And, he's somebody that both my parents are people that are huge influences on me without me even necessarily realizing, the situation that I've seen my dad go through, has given me a whole new level of respect for him that I realize where I get a lot of sort of mentalities from. Like, he's somebody that you wouldn't anticipate is like a rugged guy, but kind of is, like he's, like I said earlier, he's a preacher for the United Church, and he's a teacher for a military college, right? A science teacher for a military college.
Yeah. So
you have two different ends of the spectrum. So, he's just a very sweet, old guy. And yet, like, he's not taking his meds because he's like, look, I researched them. I saw that they had like a bunch of bad side effects. I want to enjoy the last few months I have the best way that I can. So I'm just going to kind of grit it out. Do you know what I mean? And, even to the point where he went to go and get checked out, they had to put a camera down his throat, and they were like, we can put you under anesthetic if you want. He's like, no, I need to drive home afterwards. So, like, don't do it. And there's just such as kind of like this mental toughness there. He grew up on a farm, so I think a lot of that is kind of like, installed in him, and is therefore installed in me. And I see it.
Yeah, a very inspirational guy by the sounds of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see it being rubbing off on my kids now. Like, my daughter got told the other day, I'll go outside and, and play for 10 minutes. And she goes outside and starts racking up a weight bar and doing deadlifts. Do you know what I mean? Like, she, I can see, like, she has such a determination, such a resiliency that she, just continues to, whatever it is that she's going through, you always hear her tell herself, like, yes, I can do this. Do you know what I mean? She's 7 years old, right? And this girl is like, one day she's gonna, just be an absolute world beater. Do you know what I mean? Whatever it is that she devotes herself to, she's gonna be the best of the best. Like, I guarantee it.
That's because she's got two phenomenal parents, for sure. And
you have to set a good example for them, man. So
100%. Like, so I've got 5 children, and I try to do the same for mine as well. But
wow, you've been busy.
Oh yeah. We only bought a TV last year. So final question, okay. And I'm going to throw this out to one of our viewers, James again, who's watching via YouTube. What's your funniest backstage story? So, like I say, it's not a PG podcast, but as long as it's not going to get you into trouble, any funny? What's your funniest backstage story? I'm sure you've seen a few.
Yeah, gosh, I'm trying to think of one that. Yeah, there's been a good few. I don't even know. Yeah, there was a bizarre moment, I guess. So years ago we did a Sonosphere, right? A Sonosphere show, and somebody found a bungee cord. Now, one of the wrestlers had this really strange pride in the fact that he had one giant testicle, right? Like, he got hit in the balls when he was young, and it swelled up, and I'm not kidding, it is the size of like an apple or an orange. It's by far the biggest testicle I've ever seen in my life, right? And somehow, when like people are sat around, and like, the worst thing that you can have is a group of wrestlers kind of sat around with not a lot to do, because they end up trying to entertain themselves. And this is a perfect example of kind of like the bizarre thing where, like, the shenanigans that you kind of end up where, like, I think somebody had found like one of the bungee cords, like the warm-up cords, that somebody had left at the show. And before we know it, this guy's got his giant nut out, and he's holding it, and we're using it as a target. And somebody's got one end of the bungee cord over here, and somebody's got an end, I think just a random onlooker has got the other end of the cord over here. And the only thing we could find is like a tin of tuna, and we're trying to use it as like this giant catapult to like slingshot, and using this guy's giant nut as the target. And it's one of those things where you kind of like look around and you're like, how would you ever like explain this moment? Like, how did like your path in life lead to this? Do you know what I mean? And like it yeah, just one of those funny,
Amazing.
kind of funny and like weird situations where you're like, yeah, how is this how the night ended up? Do you know what I'm saying? But yeah, I guess doesn't.
That's a good enough backstage story. I'll take that one for sure. And thank you, James, for sending in your questions, and everybody else that's watched throughout this utterly fascinating conversation with Mark Haskins. But before we go, if anybody wants to kind of reach out to you, say hi, get to learn more about you, your career, Mark Haskins, give us your social plugs. So where can they find you on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, etc.? And I've actually got, if you're not sure, I've got a little slide at the bottom there. So where can they find you, Mark?
Yeah, so you can find me at This Is Haskins on pretty much every platform. Thisishaskins.com for merch, and Haskins Online Wrestling for online wrestling advice.
Absolutely, and some pretty sweet merch as well. Got some pretty cool tees to go out and search, and I think that's thisishaskins.com. So there we go. But Mark, it's been an absolute honor and a privilege and a thrill to speak to you. I want to thank you so much for your time and all your awesome stories. But okay, we look forward to seeing you more. OTT, TNT, ICW, wherever you're performing all around the country, and hopefully I get to see you in person and say thank you in the flesh. But thank you so much for your time, my friend.
No, thank you very much for having me.
Yep, it's been great. Thank you.